Hello, my name is Donnie Gardner Bartley, and this is a follow-up presentation to the previous presentation that I did a couple days ago. That'll be part one. And this is a follow-up presentation with a little more detail. And let's see, come back to these statements here. Got a bit of hay fever. So anyway, I'm going to use some notes, and I'm going to just have this whiteboard paper up here just with a couple of points, areas. I'm going to talk about more details, and this has to do with my involvement in the first Ayahuasca church in the United States, a Santo Daime church. We were in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We formed in 1988, 89. I was one of the first and founding members, and myself and the leader of the group, named Rex Bynan, we were arrested by the federal government on May 21st, 1990, and basically, in my view, persecuted for our religious practice and use of ayahuasca. We won the case in January of 1991, and that case actually set a precedent. The judge's ruling was that we had no criminal intent, we were practicing a religion, and exactly 9 years later, on May 21st, 1999, several other people in the United States were arrested. A leader of a church in Oregon named John was arrested on May 21st, 1999 for having ayahuasca and having a church, and then the leader of the União de Vegetalista Church, Jeffrey Bronfman, he was arrested on May 21st, 1999 for having his ayahuasca in New Mexico, having a church there. So that case eventually went to the Supreme Court in 2005. It took a long time from 1999 to 2005, but eventually the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that those two individuals and the people involved with them, and subsequently also myself back in 1990, are practicing a religion and have a right to do so, and they were instructed by the Supreme Court to establish a process for exemption from the other laws that prohibit the DMT that was scheduled by, I guess, the DEA decided to schedule it at a certain point. Maybe in the 60s people were misusing DMT, and they just were scheduling everything under the sun as very dangerous, quote-unquote, narcotics. And those are the laws that they were used to persecute us and failed. So anyway, I'll briefly mention that. I don't know all the details of the UDV church by then. When that was going on, I was still involved with the Santo Daime, and I knew some of the lawyers that were on the front lines, but I decided I had already been on the front lines and I was still recovering. And so I just stayed in the background and paid attention, and I'll mention that at the end of the talk. So anyway, more details. The one subject I want to talk about is language, how we talk about plant medicines and how that evolved for me from the late 80s, 1988, 1989, when I first got involved with plant medicines, and even backs up to 1974 when the first time I used LSD. That's part of my story as well, and the story of all of these things in this time in humanity right now. So the language, how we talk about plant medicines, and how I talked about it in 1988, 89, and how my language has evolved and changed over the years. Then I would like to describe a few more ceremonial experiences which were profound for me, that I think people may want to hear, and that inspired me to be on this path, and might inspire others who hear the story of these experiences. Then actually This one should have been up here. I'm going to talk a little bit about laws, the US Constitution, universal truths and laws that are beyond our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. I'm going to just talk a little bit about that because this is my thought process around this whole story, some of it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Then I'm going to give a few more details about the case in 1990. And after that, I'm going to talk a little bit about traditional leadership roles in communities and with plant medicines and other types of ceremonial ways, non-Western ways, and probably Western ways before Christianity, how they really start out with family, married couples, and then relatives, extended family, clan, also known as clans, and then larger communities, how spiritual practices are basically evolved out of this type of a framework: family, relatives, extended family, large communities. Today we don't have this framework as strong as it was prior to the time we live in now. So anyway, I'm going to start back up with language. So like in the 1980s, I'm going to use my notes and look down here. In the 1980s, when I first got involved with Santa Dime, in 88, going to meetings and just recognizing that I had a calling and intending to go, and telling the people that were having ceremonies in Cambridge, Mass, that I definitely wanted to come. And then in 1990, when I first took ayahuasca and had incredible experiences and awakened my commitment and my recognition for what it was, the way we spoke about Santa Dime then was we weren't calling it a plant medicine. At that time, we were calling it a tea used for healing and cleansing. So basically, we called our medicine, we might have referred to it in the background as a medicine here or there, but it wasn't our common language or lingo at the time in the late 80s. We referred to our ayahuasca as daime. It was called Santa Daime. I've described what that means in the previous talk. Ayahuasca we called it, and we called it a tea used for healing and cleansing. And then sometimes we would elaborate and say a tea used for healing, cleansing, and spiritual teaching. So that's how I talked about it. Now, when I just gave my presentation, I used plant medicine and talked in the language that's developed for me over the last 35 years. But back then, I wasn't using the exact same lingo. My lingo has developed from my experience and from networking with others worldwide who are practitioners of plant medicine ceremonies. So just wanted to explain that because just to make it clear. Back then we called it a tea used for healing and cleansing, and we called it daime. Now I call it a plant medicine, and I call it daime and a tea used for healing and cleansing, and ayahuasca and yahe. It's all those things, and it came originally from Amazon people, and somehow they were developed the wisdom and the technology to make the tea and use it. However, their guidance was it's a lost history of how that came about, but it was long, thousands of years ago, a long time ago, older than all Western religions, and at least as old, if not older, than Hinduism as well. So then, now I'd like to just tell you a few more of my ceremonial experiences. Well, before I go into that, let me just say that I want to finish up about language. So eventually, my involvement in ceremonies, plant medicines in different cultures, North and South America, and then people in Europe too who have plant medicine ceremonies that I've known and I've even visited. Eventually my term, it was medicine, plant medicine, and then we call, in Santo Daime, we call our ceremonies, we call them spiritual works, because, or rituals. So we called our ceremonies rituals and work, spiritual works, because we're doing work in these ceremonies and we're learning things. We aren't just sitting there having an experience. This is something that I want to expand on as well a little bit right here. I'll take the time that it's important for people that go to plant medicine ceremonies to understand that there's a lot to learn. You don't just go have an experience and like you're going to a music concert, which is all fine and good, but going to a music concert and having a good time and using some beer or wine or whatever you're using there and then having some kind of experience and then that's what it is. That's not what plant medicine ceremonies and rituals are about. There's teachings that go with these ceremonies, and that they're universal teachings. So ceremonies that I've heard songs out of Peru, I've never participated in Peru with Peruvian traditional people. I knew a Peruvian man who was here in the United States who I did ceremonies with named Freddie, and he's now known as Chief Freddie. But he mixed in his understanding with North American traditions that he was involved with up here. Very beautiful. So, and I appreciate my brother, Chief Freddie, for his support and inspiration and for who he is and what he does. But anyway, in Peru, they have these songs called Icaros. And if somebody explains to you the language of what they're singing and what they're saying, they're very, very profound. Very profound, beautiful songs, commentary on life, on Mother Earth, on the spirits of the forest, on the spirits that help us and heal us, on love, on relationships. That's what these songs say. They aren't just chanting and making some noise. Like some kind of a music show. They have meaning and they're ancient. The teachings in the songs are ancient. They're ancient. They come from ancient wisdom, from ancient peoples, ancient cultures in the Amazon. And, there is like universal themes in ceremonial songs, like, the four elements, earth, fire, water, air. So the earth is our mother, Mother Earth, Tonantzin. That's one language where they call Mother Earth, Tonantzin. And it's something about Sacred Mother, in the heart. I don't know, I'm not an expert on that language, but very beautiful. And then fire, the element of fire, grandfather, grandmother, son, Teotihuacan. Water, grandmother water, Oshun, Yamanya. Those names come from African tradition, Oshun, Yamanya. But those are real spiritual beings that, through ceremonial ways, with or without medicines, people make connections with these beings and have relationships and understand that these are beings of creation. Water, fire, earth, and air. One name of the element of air is Yensa. That's an African name. And Yensa is a very beautiful being that manifests and speaks with people and teaches people, protects people. People pray. Some traditions, people pray just to these beings. Yensa, Oshun, Yamanya, Tonantzin, Tonantu. They have all the different names, but these are universal elements, and they're universal elements of songs and the teachings that comes in the ceremony. So when we go to ceremonies, there's a lot to learn, and it takes time. We hear people chanting in different languages, but if we really want to understand what it's like, what this is all about, we need to take time and have some humility. We're young. No matter how old we are, we're starting something we've never been involved with. We're young in that. There's a lot to learn, So it's very important to go to these ceremonies and to pay attention. And then when you hear all these songs in these different languages, put some effort in to learn about what are they saying, Find resources that know what the songs mean, and then ponder on that in the ceremonies, out of the ceremonies, and see what do these expressions mean, to you? And if for me, for many years, I was hearing these names, Oshun, Yansa, even Tonat Sin. Tonat Sin, I already had a connection with Divine Mother, so it was instant. Tonat too made total sense. But Oshun, Yamanja, these different beings, Jerema, Janainya. I'm hearing all these songs in the Santa Daima about what they are, but as time went on, and as I participated in medicine ceremonies and paid attention and pondered and asked, I started to experience these beings and hear their voices speaking to me and giving teachings, and always with so much love. And I'll start out by telling one experience that I had in Rio de Janeiro. I was at a Santo Daime church, and we had a very powerful ceremony. They called it a St. Michael ceremony, but in these ceremonies they took very large glasses of medicine, of the Santo Daime, of the Ayahuasca. And we would have 4 rounds, and we would be starting the first ceremony at one level, and they would start it down, like in the main church was down below because the church was on a mountainside. And the whole idea was to rise up 4 levels. So we would climb up to a different area. They would call it terreno, a territory, a space. In the language of the indigenous people of South America, they call it maloka. A maloka is a space to have ceremony, a sacred space. So we would start out drinking very large glasses of medicine, and this one in Rio de Janeiro, there's probably 300 people, close to that, that started out, and some people didn't stay all day and all night, but by the end there was less people, but there was still quite a lot late at night. But we would have this one first round down in the main church in Rio de Janeiro, and we would sing a whole body of songs and have our experience with this very large dose of medicine. And then when that particular round ended, we all went up to the next terreno, to the next level, to the next maloka space. So that particular time, I started out, even though I had been 15 to 20 years maybe in the medicine already, I was kind of scared for some reason. I don't know why. I just was nervous. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to take all this medicine. I don't know why. My whole life I had been struggling with fear, and around that period of life, I did a lot of work with the ceremonies and with just my life's work, dealing and overcoming fear instead of being dominated by it, understanding it. Took a long time, and finally did get to a point where I wasn't just dominated by fear to the extent that I had been from my early childhood to that point. But here at this ceremony, this St. Michael ceremony where we did the 4 terrenos and drank large glasses of medicine, at the first one, the medicine that I took, I started out afraid, and then we took the medicine, then I relaxed and felt better, but the medicine really affected me because it's very strong, and I remember all of a sudden I saw a face, a beautiful face, and it was like a native person, and they were smiling at me. And then I saw their face, and I'm closing my eyes, and then I'm still seeing the face, and then I'm opening one eye, and then still seeing the face, closing and opening the other eye, seeing the face, closing it, seeing it, like that. And then I felt telepathically the person just said to me, stop closing and opening your eyes. And open your eyes now. And I opened my eyes and I saw a whole family of native people. And actually we call them caboclos, native spirits, but there was a whole family. And they were all just smiling at me. They're standing, they had no clothes on. They had traditional things on, however the way they weave clothes in the Amazon in the hot climate, they were wearing their outfits, Amazon traditional clothing, just little skimpy things, but basically nothing, That's how a lot of Amazon people, even to this day, they live like that. And I saw these people standing there smiling at me, and they just, all of a sudden, I knew them. They said, we came to just see you. We came to greet you. We love you. We came to just embrace you and just welcome you, you know? And it just went deeply inside of my whole being, and just like, all fear just vanished. There was no fear anymore after that. It was like, there's no, in that ceremony, it was like, there's no reason to be afraid. These people that I totally recognized, like a nation of indigenous people, of caboclos, of native spirits, they came to greet me and said, we love you. We came to welcome you and to be with you and help you, take care of you. I just felt at ease, felt taken care of. It was so beautiful. And I had already been close to decades in the medicine, and that was one of the strongest visions that I ever had, and it made such a deep impression, and I received love and knowledge and things that aren't intellectual and aren't conceptual, just energetic. I received energetic wisdoms and blessings and healings from these beautiful, beautiful people in another realm. And they were Amazon people, and they were still existing somewhere else. And they were welcoming me to this beautiful medicine ceremony. So that's one of the experiences, segueing into ceremonial experiences. And I have some more. Backing up to the very beginning, my first few experiences, when I decided that I was committed and I was really seeing this Divine Mother in every single ceremony I went to. I think it was maybe the 5th ceremony I went to or something, maybe 6, and I was in the ceremony, again in that room that I spoke about where you go and compose yourself and go through things and purge. And I was in there maybe purging and going through my process and in the presence of my mother, and she's right there loving me, and I'm like, I love you, my mother, thank you for everything, thank you for healing me, waking me up, for just awakening me and welcoming me into this new way of life. And and I said, humanity is like so, I said to her, I was speaking internally to her, and I said, humanity is so dark, and there's so much evil and so much bad, and we're destroying this earth. We've destroyed the oceans. We're just destroying each other and ourselves, And she said, I said, like, why is it that you just don't destroy us all, Mother, And she told me, and then showed me with her feelings, well, you are all my children, and I'm not going to destroy my children. Everything is my children. Humanity is my children too. And yeah, it's not good what's going on here in humanity, but that's not my way to just firsthand, because, who knows. But, she was telling me in that ceremony, this isn't my way. I'm not going to destroy my children, but you are antibodies. You waking up, you recognizing me, you practicing this way, and looking back at the evolution since then, I'm very proud, personally proud that my place was to come and be in the first ayahuasca church and to have this role of being arrested by the government along with my friend Rex. I'm a US citizen, and he's not, he's from Wales. And we were supposed to together get arrested and go to the prison. And I remember Padrino Sebastian told Rex, when a lot of things that Rex shared with me, when Rex visited with him in Rio de Janeiro in 1989. He told Rex that, in the forest, nobody ever goes anywhere alone. You always go with two, And I'm remembering Rex telling me this when we were like chained together and in the cell together at the in the prison, in Danbury Federal Prison. Rex was telling me, why. I wonder why is it both of us ended up getting arrested, Don? I was making these arrangements, and I go to the airport, and then you take the day off and you come over, and here we are, both of us, and it's because you're never supposed to go alone, you're always supposed to go with somebody else, and there's times in lives we're alone, but in this case it made a lot of sense. And I asked too, like, it was clear to me that I was meant to be there all along, even though it was very painful. But that made sense to me, and I was a young person in this church, and I was very committed, and this was supposed to happen. We were supposed to get persecuted by our government and then win, and then eventually it led 16 years later, there was a ruling in 2006. So if you go 1999 to 2006, I guess that's 16 years, took that long. And the Supreme Court unanimously ruled, every single Supreme Court member ruled that UDV and Santo Daime are religions, and we have a right to practice them, and we have a right to have exemptions. So, that started for me in May 21st, 1990, when we were arrested and when we were sitting in Danbury prison for that month. And then the subsequent case and all the work we've done since then, that was the beginning. That was the beginning of this story, and that was the beginning of the chapter of these ceremonies opening up more in the United States. Before ayahuasca in the 90s, excuse me, there was some people doing ayahuasca in the United States. Hay fever, so bear with me. So anyway, before the first ayahuasca church in the United States that formed in 1989, before that, there was some American people who had ayahuasca ceremonies in the United States, and Terence McKenna, Dennis McKenna, and they were in Hawaii, and other people. There was another guy, Abby Hoffman, I guess, might have been involved or something, with ayahuasca ceremonies, and so they must have gone to South America, learned, and then they brought it back. I know I watch talks by Dennis McKenna quite a bit, and I've watched some old recordings of Terence McKenna, very inspiring. I don't know all the history, but there was some presence of ayahuasca in the United States, and I guess Dennis and his brother were intending to help, make these things more mainstream and more accepted and protected, before we came about in 1989. So we're not just the first people that ever had this. And then, again, the bigger picture, there's something in the United States called the Peyote Church, the Native American church. And then that Church of the Morning Star, there's ceremonies that use peyote. And my understanding of that story is a man named Kawana Parker, who was, I believe, had an Apache mother and a white father. He was down in Mexico, and he was a leader, and he was a leader, and he was against the persecution of Native people. He didn't like what was going on in the 1800s and then the early 1900s. He was still alive. He didn't like how things had developed and this country had developed, but Native American people were super subclass in the typical attitude of American people. Native American people were dehumanized and treated very badly and culturally exterminated and culturally not respected and supported, and really suffering. What was left of the native groups, all the lands where they lived, their lifestyle were taken away by the European settlers and colonial people, and there was reservations everywhere, and we told these people if you want to just keep living, you have to live on these prison camp reservations, and a lot of suffering. So my understanding is that Kawana Parker was down in Central America, and he was involved with the peyote ceremonies down there, likely with the Wajoli people, the Wikira people, and he was instructed by spiritual forces, by spirits, to bring 6 bundles, medicine bundles up. This is the way of these cultures. You're gonna bring 6 medicine bundles up, and you're gonna go to 6 different indigenous groups. I'm just describing it in the language that I understand. You're gonna go to 6 different nations, and you're gonna find these 6 daughters, and what I understand, he was even told the names of the daughters. So Quanah Parker rode up from Central America with these 6 bundles, medicine bundles containing peyote and containing, the instructions in the way that they did them in the bundles of how to do these ceremonies. He rode up, and he rode into one, he rode into each group, and he wrote in, okay, I'm looking for Morning Flower, and there was a person there named Morning Flower. He already knew their name, and okay, you are to hold this bundle, and you are to understand this ceremony and bring this ceremony to your people. So Quanah Parker did this with 6 different groups, nations, and gave these 6 bundles to 6 daughters. And the peyote, the modern peyote church in the early 1900s, either late 1800s or early 1900s, I believe, it started. And this Native American church, traditions with peyote up in the north of Central America, started then with Quanah Parker, bringing it up, being instructed to bring it to these 6 groups, given the name of 6 daughters that would hold these bundles. And then as time went on, the daughters passed the care of the bundles to men in their communities. And so the bundles belong to the women nation. And the women nation, each of those women gave permission and requests for the men nation in their families and groups to take care of this ceremony. And so I'm telling you all this because this is the medicine ceremony in North America with a sacred medicine. It was here before even it was in Central America for a long, long time. And South America, there's another cactus called guachuma. It's very ancient. And over in Africa, they have a medicine called iboga, and it's very similar, the use of plant medicine. And then they also, in Mexico, they have many other medicines. Some of them are mushrooms. They understood how mushrooms are used for healing and spiritual knowledge and ceremonies. And they have ancient traditions as old, if not older, than peyote from Central America with mushrooms as well. So we, European descent people, are the first people. We've received this gift that was taken care of and held by indigenous people for many, many thousands of years. And now these gifts are available to all of humanity because these people took care of them, and they aren't just, we don't have to rediscover them or reinvent. The traditions and the teachings come along with them, So I digressed a little bit about that, and back to that had to do with the antibodies, And it's not just medicine, the use of medicine that's the antibody, it's human beings. My mother told me that she's talking to me, and she wasn't just talking about me, Donnie, alone. You are the antibodies. She said plural. And I love you. And you will be antibodies. You will grow through life, and you will help heal this sickness in the world, the sicknesses of humanity. So that was like one of my early works, and that made a really deep, profound impression on me. We're antibodies, Some people say light workers, all these different things, different languages, but we, the people who are on the path of healing, I'll go here again. We the people who are on the paths of love, of respect, dignity, respect for our own dignity and for the dignity of others, care for everyone and everything, especially all mothers and children everywhere in the world, all families. Beauty way, to heart way, sunshine road, warm-hearted way. That's what beauty way is. It's warm-hearted, good-hearted, heart. We have a mind that's up here, an intellectual mind, and we have a mind that's in our heart. And that mind in the heart, it doesn't have to think in the same way that the mind up here thinks. It's feeling, and also the beauty way, the warm-hearted way, the caring way, all that comes out of this heart center. And that's the way that we're antibodies. That's the way that we're helping to change and heal this world. Love, care, beauty way, warm-hearted way, sunshine road, compassion. Down here, dignity, respect means equanimity, compassion, equanimity, responsibility, maturity, calmness, support, supportive. Those are some of the words that describe how we are antibodies, how we, through all of life, how we live as an antibody to the sicknesses here in this realm. One of the first Tibetan lamas, a man named Lama Pema from New York, Sakya, I believe is Sakya Lama from New York, and he has a center there, and I was allowed to receive Tara teachings from him and Medicine Buddha teachings from him. But he said something when he was teaching us about Tara, about specific Tara teachings. He said, he said something like, we have, I think he said 137 hell realms. It's like, you think you have a hell realm. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's 137 hell realms. So, it made an impression on me because, that's what the sicknesses of the world, they are hell realms right here. But we as antibodies, transform that. So that was the kind of wisdom seeds that were planted in those first ceremonies by the beautiful voice of the mother receiving me into awakenness and guidance and healing. And so there was another work we had, and we probably had about 50 people, dancing. Somebody was up from Brazil. A leader of one of the churches in Brazil came up and was leading this particular ceremony, and we're dancing and having our medicine, and right in the middle, I think in the middle we weren't dancing, we were singing this very sacred song. We were all holding candles, and it's a song of just confessing everything about us, that all of our faults to the divine, and asking for forgiveness, to learn about forgiveness. I was standing there with my candle, and I was standing next to another guy, and right in the middle of this song, just a whole wave came, and I just passed out, and the guy next to me passed out, and we passed out on top of each other. And through the whole room, several people just passed out. They just dropped, from this power that just came down, boom, And people had to run over and get our candles, make sure that we weren't burning each other. I think the guy next to me, his hair got burnt a little, And and in that passing out, in that dropping, I went on this incredible journey. And the journey brought me, part of it was through ancient battlefields in humanity on this earth. And somehow I was there, and there were memories. And these battles had to do with the persecution by people with ill intent against innocent people. That's what these battles were about. And there was, terrible fighting and battle, and it was this battlefield, a battlefield that was being waged by people persecuting against innocent people who were being persecuted. That made a profound impression on me, that vision or that journey during that time. And as time went on and I experienced persecution, I realized that, this path that I'm on, and the path of humanity, a big spiritual teaching is about persecution. And you know, the story of Jesus is this man was persecuted and murdered, you know, and I'm not trying to just preach Jesus or Christianity, but, you know, that story is one story. And in Santa Daim, we have a lot of focus on Jesus, so I learned a lot then. I paid attention. And when we were persecuted, it just made a lot of sense. Like, there's some spiritual teaching about persecution, you know, that it's wrong. It's wrong to persecute others. It's wrong to use the name of your religion to persecute others. That's the story of this man Jesus. The religious people of his time persecuted him, and they requested him to be murdered by their government. So the religion, the church of his people, persecuted him and murdered him, and they were wrong, because he was a holy man, teaching good things, healing people, guiding. He was a powerful being. He allowed himself, or his destiny was to go through this persecution, and it leaves a lesson for us that, oh, you know, people persecute each other, and it's wrong. And so that's why I'm telling you, talking about this particular vision of the ancient battlefield. There was another ceremony we had, and this definitely had a person from Brazil was leading the ceremony. And in this ceremony, I was sitting at the table, and there was other people at the table. And I think everybody at the table are people who remained years later, decades later. There are people that were still involved in the Santo Daime movement in the United States. And all of a sudden in the middle, I was brought into like a realm where I was just seeing darkness and clouds and planes dropping bombs. And the environment was a 20th century battlefield. So it was like an astral realm that was over the World War II battles of Germany. And it was, and I could perceive the evil of what was being done in Germany, and how the rest of humanity were fighting against this evil at the time. And I'm sitting at this table, and all of a sudden I see myself, and I have a uniform on, but there's blood coming out of me all over the uniform. And I look around, and everybody at the table, the person leading it, and another lawyer who stayed with the church and had his own church later to this day, and another person who started his own church in Oregon, they're all there, and they all had uniforms, different uniforms on. And it was, my perception was, in humanity there's a battle, you know, and there's people that come into this humanity and take roles and seize power and do very bad things against the rest of us, and it's an ongoing battle. So that was a very strong vision that I was shown, and it definitely was a view into the realm, to the astral realm of the World War II in Europe. You know, there was another ceremony that I was at where I think it might have been, you know, within a couple of days of that other one I just told you about, or it actually was a couple months later. Now I'm remembering. But in this particular ceremony, there was a bunch of people that just came back from Brazil, and we were having the ceremony, and then right in the middle, we were in a concentration moment. We weren't singing and dancing, but we were all sitting concentrating, and all of a sudden I was taken, and I was in the body of a deer just running through the forest, and I'm running, like frantically running, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, I'm a deer, you know, and I'm running through the woods, the forest, and just something in me frantically running, searching, and I'm running like I've got to get wherever it is. And then all of a sudden I came to a clearing, running in this body of a deer, and I come to a clearing, and in the clearing are people and some of them were the people that were running the ceremony. They were around a campfire, and they were singing sacred songs, and there was this beautiful fire that was the altar center of the ceremony. And and when I came into this clearing, and some of the people looked at me, and then I just saw this fire, and then this giant voice, a spiritual voice told me, "You're home." And something in me said, "I'm home. This is home." And somehow I ended up leaving the room, and it's kind of funny because I still was in that state of being a deer, and somehow I ran out of the room. I think, and I was in. Later on, the ceremony ended, and they found me in the hallway outside the room. There was a rug, and I was like curled up in this rug, hiding, just like a deer would hide, you know. And they were cleaning up, and they were like, "Oh my God, here's Don. We've been looking for you. We didn't know what happened to you." And I was just coming, you know, down from this experience of being a deer, running and having that experience. Somehow I spent, you know, quite a significant amount of time rolled up in a rug outside, you know, still being a deer and still just processing that experience. And that I'm home. And it just made an incredibly deep impression on me. And as time went on over the years, I realized, yeah, I'm home. When I'm these ceremonies and my feet on the ground on this Mother Earth, I'm home, you know, and understanding how to respect the elements, fire, and use these medicines and grow and sing these songs and be the antibodies. I'm definitely home, you know. So, let me see now. There's one other one I'm going to share before I move on. In the mid 90s, 1996, 97, I had been away from the Santo Daime for quite a long time, and then there was a group in Washington D.C. who formed, and I connected with them, and they were having ceremonies down in the Washington D.C., Maryland area. So I started going down there, and then I eventually moved down there and spent 2 years living there in the group. And at the beginning of my going there, I'm not sure if I was visiting there. I think I might have just moved there. But we were having a very beautiful ceremony, and I think people from out of town, all over the country, would come and visit us because there was groups all over the country. And we were, you know, private and underground, but our attitude was we're going to practice our tradition, and we're not going to be afraid, you know. So we did. And so I was dancing. We did this beautiful dance that I described earlier, and we were singing our songs, and we would have, so we didn't always remember the songs. We would have our books that had the songs so we could remember them, because there's hundreds of songs. It took a long time to remember them, all the words. So dancing, you know, with my book and singing along, and I heard these beautiful voices, and I just call them spirits and spirit guides. They're very humorous. They've spoken to me before in dreams, and the way they speak is humorous. I just hear them go, "Hey!" Just dancing along, singing my song, and they go, "Hey!" And so I pay attention, and there seemed to be two of them. And they said, "Hey, do you remember when you were like 12, 13 years old, and you took LSD first time?" And I'm like, you know, yeah, I'm still dancing and singing, you know, looking at the song, and this is going on in my consciousness. "You remember that? And you remember that you were walking down the road, and your friend said, yeah, they have peyote churches where they use it, you know, the peyote, and it's their way of life. And then you said, when I grow up, I want to be in churches like that. You know, that's what I want to do when I grow up." And they said, "Do you remember that?" And I'm dancing back and forth, playing, "Yeah, I remember that." And they go, "Hey, look where you are right now." You know, and I'm dancing in this ceremony, and then my whole consciousness came back from their voices to the ceremony, and I went, "Oh my God!" And I almost fell out. I had to go sit down, and I just went, "Oh my God, look where I am right now." And when I did do LSD at 12 years old, and just before I turned 13. You know, now the thought of any child doing drugs horrifies me, and drinking, but I have to honestly say that taking LSD at 12 years old in July, just before I turned 13, I think it was actually August, just before I turned 13, so it would have been 1974, and taking that LSD, it changed my life and it saved my life. It really did, because I was very, very traumatized. I was suicidal. I had no clue about life, and I was just really ready to give up and just horrified with life. And just taking that beautiful medicine, LSD, it totally, you know, for a few times in August 1974, it totally transformed me. And I did have that seed planted. When I grow up, I want to support this. I want to be in churches like this, you know. And that's what happened. There I was in these beautiful spirits, spirit guides, spirit caboclos, whatever spirits they were, telling me, hey, you remember that? Look where you are right now. So I wanted to share those details because I think sharing these are helpful to people. And I'm going to go back to what I was talking about before, the songs, you know, about Mother Earth and the elements. There's teachings in all these things. And the songs that people sing, they come from experience, you know, and they come in the songs that we sing in our ceremonies are teachings, you know. I've seen a lot of people just come to ceremonies like it's a show or something, or like some kind of an experience that isn't necessarily spiritual or borderline, but it's really important to come and to have some humility, no matter how old you are. If you're young or if you're older, if you go to a ceremony for the first time, you're young in that, and you know, just to open up to what is being taught here by the spirits, by the medicines themselves, by the songs that are sung, you know, because we need to learn those things. And then before we appoint ourselves as leaders and experts and go out and try to teach other people about these things, we need to learn them. That takes time, and that takes the walk of life. We have to walk the walk of life of the things that we learn. We don't just become experts. I've seen so many people think that they're experts and behave very, very badly towards others, and then even start disappointing themselves in getting some medicines and leading ceremonies and being really disrespectful of other people and of the medicines, you know. I don't in any way, shape, or form condone that or support it. And I believe it's my life's duty to call that out. And I also believe after all these years that, you know, I was a person persecuted by the United States government for this, you know, for these ways. And if anybody has a right to say anything, I believe I do, you know. I have a right to call things out that aren't correct, that are mistreating others or misusing this medicine or misusing people, you know, in any way, shape, or form, on the backs of these medicine and all the people that suffered for them, to just come in and just appoint yourself as some kind of a leader and an expert. I just really want to stress how much we just have to learn a lot from these traditions before we go out and try to teach others about them, you know. My Dakota medicine man friend used to say, don't invite other people here. You know, you come yourself and learn something. And if people are called, we can welcome them. And that's what the Santo Daime taught at first, and it was really stressed to me. We don't like invite people, we welcome them if they have a calling. You have to have a calling. And even my friend Jamie Alea, who told me about these ways back in 1988, first thing she said, this is a calling. You know, in the conversation we had at the gathering of friends, when I was telling her I'm recovering from my own personal traumas and struggles, and she shared with me about her involvement with, you know, the ayahuasca tea, and that it's you know, good for people, healing, but it's a calling. First thing she said, this is a calling. And that is my position, that we should never invite people to these, we should welcome people. So we should welcome people who have a calling, and if we're guided to welcome them, then we'll welcome you, but we're not promoting, and I don't believe that this should be promoted as much. There are people promoting it, and maybe they're helping people, so I'm not like the law or the police, but in general, it's a calling, you know, and we shouldn't go to any ceremonies or use any plant medicines or do anything spiritual unless we have a calling. Learn about Buddhism, practice meditation, go to church, do anything. If it's a calling in us, then we answer that calling. Okay, so the next subject that I want to talk about, skip down here. We're going to come back to that. So laws, the United States Constitution, the universal truths and laws that are beyond the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. So the laws of this land, this country, the story goes that people came over here from Europe to seek freedom, and those people did bad things to the people here, and that isn't right, The story of how the United States was formed, European people were here on this land, North America, and there was 13 colonies. My heritage is largely colonial settler, and I'm very proud that some of it is actually Native American, even though I'm not a part of any Native American nation. The Native American nations, some of them are my friends and relatives, they have standards like, you're full-blooded people that are part of their families, and you're a Mohawk if you're a Mohawk, yeah. I just happen to have a Mohawk great-great-grandmother, grandfather, and great-great-grandmothers and grandfathers going up to her, but that doesn't give me any kind of a right to claim that I belong to the Mohawk Nation or that I speak for the Mohawks, because I don't. I only speak for myself. I speak for myself, my connection to being Native American mixed in with my white colonial settler heritage and ethnic makeup, So I have my own feelings, and I do identify with the spirit that I feel with Mohawk people and other Native people. I identify with that, but I still don't claim that I'm Mohawk, and I don't speak for the Mohawks. The Mohawk people that I know, some of them are relatives who we call brother, but they've been very nice to me, and one friend of mine went and looked up on the rosters and found my great-grandmother's name, Henrietta Porter, and that's, anyway, there's in the 1700s, the people wanted to break off from the King of England, and it was like hold on. So like I said, I was mentioning my heritage is mostly colonial settler people, and I had my even genealogy done, and it even says that your majority of your genealogy is colonial settler. And, and I have 3 grandparents that have Native. One of them we know is Mohawk Henrietta Porter, and William Smith, her father, and his father, Josiah. I don't know the rest of his name. And so that was my father's mother. Her name was Esther Taylor from Glastonbury, Portland, Connecticut. Their family, the Taylor family, they've been there since the 1600s in Glastonbury, Connecticut, Portland, Connecticut. And her husband, Elmer Gardner, apparently he was a colonial settler, heritage person, Yankee, and also apparently had a Blackfoot lineage in his mother's side. So I've heard that, and I've heard that people in our family have that genealogy done. I haven't seen that. I have seen the genealogy that goes to other known people. That same grandfather, Elmer Gardner, his lineage contains the name Franklin, and my cousin Tracy did some very extensive genealogical research and clarified what my father told me about having people who wrote the Constitution in their family and settled and formed the United States. So my 8th great-grandfather was James Abel Franklin, and his brother was Benjamin Franklin. And in fact, his brother, my 8th great uncle, Benjamin Franklin, actually did write the Constitution of the United States. He was one of the main authors. And I understand that that my 8th great uncle, Benjamin Franklin, is responsible for the concept of religious freedom. I also understand that my 8th great uncle, Benjamin Franklin, met with Mohawk people and other Iroquois people and learned about democracy, concepts of democracy from the Mohawks and the Iroquois, how they formed. They have their own history of peacemaker and forming the Iroquois Federation. And I only have limited knowledge of that, but my great uncle Benjamin Franklin brought some of those ideas of democracy, not just from the Roman model, but from the Iroquois nation model to the Constitution of the United States. And when they had the Revolutionary War, they wrote this Declaration of Independence, and the first line is, all contain the phrase, all men are created equal. And that it's true, all people, all men and women are created equal. And even though they wrote that, and at the time it might not have been a reality in the way they all practiced, they believed that fundamental truth, and it is a fundamental truth. All people are created equal. I believe everything, all beings are created equal. So, but anyway, as far as humanity goes, all men, all women, all ethnicities, all races, all nations, we're all equal. No one's any better or any superior to anybody else. And we hold these truths to be self-evident that all people are created equal. So those people wrote that, 250 years ago. When I was a kid, it was 200 years ago. Now 250-ish years ago. They wrote that, and they made that Declaration of Independence from the dictator monarchy in England and said, we're going to be a free, self-governing society here. And, a big inspiration for how they formed this self-governing society came from Benjamin Franklin meeting with Mohawks and Iroquois, people, and them sharing how we do things, So, they don't teach us that as much in history because somehow we still have a lot of prejudices, and it's lasted all these years. And you can see right now how much it's going on. We're having book bannings and trying to forbid the teaching about race issues and all that kind of strange things. It's still going on right now. Very odd. That needs to heal, Anyway, the laws of this land, we had that Declaration of Independence, and they declared all people are created equal. We hold this to be self-evident, and yeah, it is self-evident, and it was before those people wrote that paper. It's self-evident for as long as human beings have existed. We're all equal, it is self-evident, and then they wrote this Constitution, and the first article, or the First Amendment, the First Amendment contains the statement about religious freedom, and it's something like, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, and they shall make, maybe the second part I'm not remembering word per word, but they shall make no law regarding the practice of religion thereof. So there is your religious freedom. There shall be no law regarding religion or against the practice of any religion. Okay? So my 8th grade uncle is responsible for writing that. And since he wrote that, hundreds and hundreds of millions of thousands of millions of people have based their authority and based their whole reference of life on that piece of paper, those pieces of paper. And yet, that was true before Uncle Benjamin Franklin wrote that. That was true. It was true for the Native people. It was true for every people everywhere. But, look at what we do. So this Constitution is to this day still, and it has been used as an authority, and it's been misused too, So the people that arrested me under the authority of that Constitution. But it says right in it, there shall be no law regarding the establishment of any religion, and there shall be no law against the practice of any religion. So how is it that they really have the authority to arrest and persecute me or anybody for practicing the religion, the spiritual practice of our choice? Thank goodness it turned out where that was recognized. In 2005, when the Supreme Court heard the UDV case, and then in 2006 when they ruled unanimously, every single justice, conservative to liberal, every single one of them ruled that we, people who drink ayahuasca, to drink Santo Daime, drink the UDV medicine, ayahuasca, we who use that and are practicing our religion. And we have every right to do that. And even under the framework of the Constitution that they use to base and interpret law and develop more laws there, on top of it, we have that right. So I'm happy that the Supreme Court ruled unanimously. That doesn't happen. Unanimous rules, religious freedom. Thank you, Supreme Court members. I'm not very thankful about all your rulings and all of what you've all espoused, but I'm very, very thankful that you ruled in 2006 in the UDV, and Santo Daime was part of that case, that you ruled unanimously that we have the right to religiously practice this. We should get exemptions, and they made rules. I guess the DEA came right in and made rules. We still have to control this somehow. So, yeah, it's good to have, some controls on who's allowed to just have medicines and give them, but not by people who don't respect us. The body of rules needs to be made by high integrity practicing plant medicine ceremonial people. So that's where the rules need to be and laws need to come from about how this is done. And that's going to be a work that's going to be ongoing. And that's partly why I'm making these talks, these presentations, just to add to the whole discussion, to inspire people a little bit, and for them to know this piece of the story too, these pieces of the story. And we are motivated, right, by the goodness and by intelligence that people like Rick Dobbin of MAPS and people like that. There's some other groups that are watchdog groups. They're motivated to advance. Stan Groff and others. They were motivated to advance the use of these sacred medicines in a good, healthy, true way. They're motivated by their intelligence, by their motivation. It is motivation, So, I lost my train of thought again, so I'll stop there with that piece, and I'll come back to when it comes back to me. Okay. So anyway, when I talk about the Constitution and the laws, right, they mean something. They're all we have in this country right now. It's 2023, right? And we have this Constitution that everyone bases their authority off of in this country. And we really are, with all of our flaws and problems, right? And our history, atrocious histories too, and good history. We really are the freest country, We're supposed to be examples of freedom. We're supposed to never allow dictators to take over, We're supposed to never allow that. And these people who wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they tried to design it such that no one could ever take over and corrupt it and make it, an authoritarian dictatorship. And yet somehow there's still people that found ways to do it. Some of those people are rich and powerful, and I don't know what motivates them, but sons and daughters of destruction. That's the sicknesses that we need to be antibodies against. And so there's a lot of work. It's a big, big, big picture, and I'm just a small piece, one antibody of many. We are the antibodies, plural. And plant medicine antibodies, practitioner antibodies are one set of antibodies. It's a big thing. It's a big picture. And I'm saying that because these papers, these laws, right? There's a lot of Native American groups, and they have feelings like, hey, you guys decimated us, destroyed us. Now you want us to be a part of your laws and respect your laws. I just say, here we are, we're all one human family, and this is what we have to work with, right? What we have to work with is this country, its constitution, its set of laws, and hopefully more respect and empowerment of the sovereign Native groups too, more than we have been up till now, because we need all that. So I'm talking about laws, and there's some people who are traditional people who may say, I don't care about your laws. We're never gonna, no good can ever come of it. In some ways they're right, but in other ways this is what we all have to work with, So, yeah, there shall be no law against the practice of any religion. That was true before they wrote that, and it's true now. And thank goodness, in 2006, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that truth and applied it to the UDV Church and the Santo Daime Church. These ayahuasca ceremonies, sacred medicine ceremonies. And that doesn't mean that anybody can just go and do ceremonies, because the DEA can come in and bust anybody that they want to. And that doesn't mean that anybody can bring it over borders, because that's where Rex and I got arrested for, bringing ayahuasca over a border. That's what the charge is, in 1999, when the government arrested my roommate in Washington, D.C. area, Maryland, his name was Alan. I've been in touch with him really since quite a long time, so I don't really know. He has his own story, but at the time, my roommate, and there's no mistake that I was living there with him as his roommate, and that, it was either in May 1999 or April. It was just a few weeks before, or a month before, Jonathan and Jeffrey Bronfman were arrested, which was on May 21st, 1999, exactly 9 years later after our case. The universe saying something to all of us. But anyway, when Alan was arrested, he was being held. He came back from Brazil and he had some ayahuasca in his luggage, and he got arrested and confiscated. Just before that, when the leader of the church, a woman named Candida, who's not alive anymore, she went to pick up the shipment, a shipment before Alan got arrested. She went and picked up a shipment, and they held it. They contacted her, said, we're not releasing this. Then, so they were obviously like looking at us and watching us, and the agent within, there's definitely people in us, in our groups that are part of that, not really sincerely part of our practice, but there to see how they can, press charges against us, I guess. But anyway, when Alan was arrested, he was being held, and Alan had 2 children that were living in our house, and his wife, and I was living in the house, and there was another woman living in the house with a son, and I think it was an FBI agent, 2 FBI agents came over to the house, and they very respectfully said, can we come and talk to you? And they came over to our house, and the adults that lived in the house, we let them in. We went into the back room where we had our ceremonial room. We had a giant altar. We had a very beautiful giant statue of Divine Mother, something like this picture in the back over here. Very giant, beautiful statue that this guy named Bill had gotten, and it was very beautiful. It was a very beautiful room, and these FBI agents sat in the room with us, and they looked at the altar, and they looked at us, and they just asked us some questions. And when we're walking in there, I saw, it was late at night, and the children were sleeping, and I saw the children's colorings on the refrigerator, and I just had a thought, oh my God, are they gonna drag us all off and drag these children away and arrest us? That's what I thought, based on what I experienced in 1990, which was actually a different Justice Department in 1999, different approach, different motivation, I guess. So these FBI agents asked us a few questions, and we sat there, Alan's wife, myself, and the other woman that lived there at the time, and we answered their questions, and I spoke, because I had been through this, I spoke a little and just said, yeah, we're a church. This is our church. And we just said what they were doing, and they were very nice, and they left. And a few days later, they released Alan. And within a very short time, they told him, maybe it wasn't, I'll come back to that later, but they released him. And they they didn't arrest the children and take us all away. And I was really kind of, relieved after my experience in 1990. But then it was a few weeks or a month later when we got word that John had been arrested in Oregon, and Jeffrey Bronfman on the same day. And we had a copy of the indictment. It was shortly after we got word, but within a few days we had a copy of an indictment, U.S. versus Jonathan Goldman, and it said, on May 21st, 1999, he was arrested. And when I saw that, I had this in my hand, and I said, oh my God, May 21st, that's the same exact day. And I went to my box, and I got my indictment out, and it said, on May 21st, 1990, Rex Vine and Don Bartley, were arrested, Donald Bartley. And I was just like, wow. The same exact day, the universe is saying something. I really had a sense that I don't think that these guys orchestrated it and they were like, haha, we're going to do this on the same day. The universe was telling us something, 9 years later, and okay, here's the next chapter. It started. So, let's see here. Anyway, what happened shortly after, back to this, after Alan was arrested and Jonathan was arrested and Jeffrey Bronfman was arrested, the Justice Department very shortly after said to all of them, you know what, we see that you guys are all practicing a religion, and we don't want to persecute you. That's what they were all told. So we're going to drop all the charges against you, dismiss all the charges. But we don't want you guys to be smuggling ayahuasca over borders. We want you to get lawyers and to seek, official exemption, work with the government and seek official exemption and figure out a process. So that's what they told. I don't know Jeffrey Bronfman, but this is what I was told. He was told. And that's what I was told. Jonathan Goldman was told. I do know the church leader in Washington, D.C. at the time told me everything that was being told. Jonathan has his own story, so I'm not speaking for Jonathan. He can tell his own story. This is my story and my perception, my understanding, and my perspective on everything. And it's mine, it's not anybody else's. So, and Alan charges are dropped. And it was very beautiful that happened, especially after the 1990 thing. I was shocked, And it's kind of funny, just a couple weeks before Alan got arrested, and then it was all within like a month, of May 21st. But I just had this dream, and I was living there in Maryland in the house with Alan and his wife and Alan's children, and another woman and her children, and then another woman. There was another woman living there who owned the house. She was living there as well. That was the household, and I was living in that house. We were having our church meetings at the house, so we didn't have to go rent churches and do ceremonies. We were on our own property, and I had this dream one night, and the dream made a real profound impression on me as being important, and it was. It turns out that it was. This dream contained indications that this arrest thing was going to happen. In the dream, I was like in some kind of a dark city, I'm wandering around in the streets. It was like New York City, or it was like a universal modern city, but it was dark. There was no sunlight. It was just dark, and the city was all this confusion and people selling stuff and all kinds of mayhem going on in the city. And I'm wandering through the city and going like, oh, feeling the heaviness of the mayhem, And later on, I came to see that the city represented just normal American or normal world culture, And wandering through the city, and people are trying to sell me stuff. Buy this, do that, buy this, come here, do this, take this, do that, come, give me your energy, And all of a sudden, on top of me, something opened up, like a hatch door opened up. And there was like a ladder, and through the hatch door was this beautiful sunlight. And this whole city was dark, damp, there was no sunlight. So something said, come on, and I climbed up this ladder through this hatch door, closed the hatch door, and it was a beautiful mountainside, peaceful mountainside with birds singing and the sun shining, just like this sun out here. That was what was through the hatch door. I closed it. It was like that city was gone. I'm on this beautiful grassy mountainside with trees and gentle wind, and and then the sun was there. And then the sun told me, the sun spoke to me, and the sun said, relax, you know. And I just like laid down and I was taking in the sun, and the sun was telling me, just relax, you know, just take it in, you know. And I was laying there on this hillside, mountainside, grassy, and then all of a sudden, right in front of me, this mechanical, like robot owl landed in front of me, and it was like this metallic thing with metal, like wings and funny eyes, and it's just like, you know, and it had some kind of a message. And then behind this mechanical owl, I look up and there's a helicopter with two propellers, like a black helicopter. And then lines came down out of the helicopter, and these guys slid down, and they were like American authorities, and they're running, and they're like, and then they were gonna like arrest people. And I woke up from the dream, and I was feeling this heavy dread. Oh my God, you know, they're gonna come and arrest people, you know, again, you know. And you know, I had this dream before it happened, and then all this came about like a month later, and I realized this dream was telling me something. This dream, I was being prepared because I'm a part of this whole story. So I was being told, hey, Donnie, you know, this is, first of all, here's this world, you know, this crazy, chaotic world. Everybody wants your energy. Everybody's trying to sell you something. But here's this escape hatch. Go up there. And what's there is sun and nature, Mother Earth. And then lay down, and then the sun who is a being of creation, you know, a great grandfather, grandmother being that gives us life. The sun told me with all this love, relax, just take it in. And then this messenger comes, the owl. The owl is a messenger, and it's a mechanical metal owl. And then behind it is this, I knew it was a United States helicopter, and these authorities slid down ropes onto the grass, and they come running over, and we're going to arrest everybody. And I wake up like, oh my God. And that's exactly what happened. You know, it happened, you know, a few weeks later. They did. They arrested everybody. They arrested Jonathan and Jeffrey Brofman on the same day. And I don't know if they said we're going to do this on the same day, or that May 21st was significant to them, but that's what happened, you know. So before I move on to more details about the case, my case from 1990, I just want to like kind of conclude about what I'm talking about with laws. You know, so it means something to me that my 8th grade uncle was Benjamin Franklin, and that he is responsible for writing the concept of religious freedom into our body of laws, into the United States Constitution. It also means something to me that my 8th grade uncle, Benjamin Franklin, met with Mohawk Iroquois people to learn about how they govern themselves, and that he took some of these concepts from Iroquois people. He like, yeah, those are good, and he took them into the body of designing this government that we have in the United States. That means something to me, you know. It means something to me that my great-grandmother Henrietta Porter, and she's a Mohawk. It means something to me that you know, my grandfather Elmer Gardner had mother supposedly had some Blackfoot in their lineage. I don't know that for sure, but I was told that in my family lineage. It means something to me that during the Wounded Knee, you know, events in the 70s as a child, for some reason, something in me had solidarity, and a lot of us were wearing like red bandanas on our knees, just in solidarity. I don't know why, as a young teenage child, I had solidarity, but I did naturally had solidarity, and like, wait, something's wrong. And then it means something to me that I was spending time alone with my grandfather, John Leslie, and he just out of the blue says, Donnie, and he's crying, he's got tears in his eyes. He said, Donnie, I don't want you to ever forget that we have Native American heritage. I'm like, what? I didn't know that, Grandpa. And then my whole world changed. I'm not just a white person. I have another colored race in my heritage, you know, and it shouldn't mean so much, but it does. It's a shock for people because we have such identity with a race and ethnicity. And there's good and bad in that, you know. But anyway, it means something to me, all these things, you know. And it means something to me that dozens of my ancestors are colonial settlers. James Abel Franklin, the first newspaper maybe in the country, right? And my great uncle started newspapers, started the post office, wrote the Constitution. That's when I was chained to Rex and spending time in Danbury, I knew that the reason I was there, that I had a place, I had a role to play, and that it had something to do with my family history, you know. It had something to do with the fact that I was linked to people from colonial times, and my father telling me that people who wrote the Constitution. That's the reason why I was arrested in 1990 and I was in that prison, and that I was part of this struggle. Call it a fight. I like to use the word defending rather than warrior. I'm a defender. I'm a defender of what's true and what's good, you know. But I don't want to be a warrior who starts wars, but I want to be a defender of good things, you know. So I like to think of myself as a defender, you know. And there's family karma in it. There's reasons why my blood lineage and, you know, how these things work, that I was given this place to go through all this experience, and then now even to develop all the understanding that I have since 1990 till now, 2023, and then to try to share it with others like I'm trying right now. You know, so just, you know, I'm sharing about the Constitution, all these things. It's important. We have laws. It's all we have to work with. And even indigenous groups who are resentful against what was done to them, it's still what we have to work with. How are we going to work together to become in unity? You know, I'm going to put it right here again. Where is it? Common unity. Community is common unity. How are we going to have common unity amongst us if we don't work with what we have and then make it better? So that's what I advocate. I think those people were motivated by truths when they wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and they envisioned honesty and integrity. They didn't envision people, criminals, misusing these things for their own personal gain of power, money, and, you know, to become dictators. They didn't envision that or plan that. It's not what they wanted. They planned, you know, how can we design this way of governing ourselves? And they even said a government of the people, by the people, for the people. This is universal. This belongs to everybody everywhere. And if we want to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people, we have to want that for everybody, for people all over the world, for every ethnic group, every race, every nation. A government, we have to govern ourselves of the people, by the people, for the people. Not for the rich corporations or whatever. That's secondary. That's of the people, by the people, and for the people too. In theory, you know, that's our battle. That's our struggle, right? So just concluding like that with the law. I know there's groups that they're like, you know, I don't really care about your Constitution and your laws, but this is what we have to work with, and I believe in that. So I've talked about laws, U.S. Constitution, universal truths and laws, and I said a lot of things. Now I'm going to go back to some more details about the case in 1990. You know, so when they arrested us in 1990, and then Rex and I spent like a week and a half in Danbury prison. We had no charges. We're just being held without any charges in this federal prison. This magistrate just ordered us hold them. And it was based, when she ordered us to be held with no charges, it was based on an affidavit that the DEA gave to the court. And this affidavit said that there was an agent in the field in Brazil. So, I mean, and my impression was, some kind of a government agent, or, an agent is an agent, right? A government agent in the field in Brazil, in the church there, right? Who tipped them off that the church was sending a shipment up to us. Right there, that was like, okay. So there's somebody in the church group down there that is an agent, a federal agent, and who tipped off that, hey, they're sending ayahuasca to the United States. Go arrest these guys. The funny thing too is we're over here and we're thinking, okay, we don't know of anything that's in this that's illegal, but we got to make sure we're starting a church. We're importing this stuff from Brazil, and Rex, I think it was advised by the lawyer who was advising us, who later became a church founder himself somewhere else in the country. But he, at that time he was just supporting us and spending time with us, and he had helped other indigenous groups in New England to do legal work against injustices, successfully. Anyway, I believe he advised Rex, go down to the FDA, bring a sample and ask them. Here's a sample of this tea that we use for healing and cleansing. We use it ritualistically. It's very old. He explained to you, so he did. He went down to the FDA, brought this sample, and asked them, this is a tea used for cleansing and healing and ritualistic use. It's very old, and we are practicing we want to practice the rituals here and bring this tea and import it. Can we do it? Here's a sample, right? And I remember I was living with Rex and Jamie LA at the time, and I remember when they told him, they gave him word, yeah, okay, we tested this sample. Yeah, sure, you can import this, And then next was this big shipment with the 10 gallons, and then, the dozens of guys. I used to say 50, but when I think about it, it was definitely dozens. It was more than 2 dozen. It was closer to like 3 dozen guys with guns, giant guns running from every direction, come running, So we go from, the FDA, just try to be right up front asking them, and we go to like, yeah, sure, go. We don't see anything wrong. We tested this stuff. We don't see anything bad in it. Go ahead and import it. Do your rituals, And then we have the guys coming from every direction. So this affidavit said, an agent in the field in Brazil, which I interpret to be somebody in the church down there, right? Tipped off that there's a shipment coming from the church in Rio de Janeiro up to us. Okay? That was one of the first statement of the affidavit. And the second statement was that in Brazil, some field agents of the DEA went and tested the ayahuasca and found it to be positive for LSD. So that they wrote that in an affidavit and they presented that in federal court. There is no way on earth that you could test ayahuasca and find it positive for LSD, because ayahuasca does not contain LSD. And there is no legitimate test that the government would use that would test ayahuasca and find positive for the presence of LSD. So I knew that, first of all, we've got somebody in our church, I guess, down in Brazil, who's part of like an undercover person who thinks whatever they're doing is bad and knows that we're trying to open up centers in the United States, and then they're just going to make up stuff. These guys, these federal agents, they're going to go into federal court and just say whatever they want. Hey, yeah, we tested this stuff and it's positive for LSD. They just made that up. So based on that affidavit, and then we busted them, and then we allowed it to be shipped, and we wanted to see who received it, and we put a trigger on the crate, and when those guys moved it out of the trunk, right, it triggered the thing, and I looked and I saw them in the van. I'm like, who are those guys? They all came running and they arrested us, So that was the first affidavit, right? And after we spent a couple weeks, week and a half or so, just under maybe 2 weeks, week and a half, we were brought to another hearing. We're sitting there like, what is going on? We're just being held. Are we going to have a hearing or anything? We're not even charged. And then they brought us back from Danbury, Connecticut. They drove us back to Boston. And I think we're chained to a bunch of organized crime guys again. We're brought to Boston for hearings. So when we go into this hearing, that affidavit was gone from the file. It didn't even exist anymore. There was a new affidavit that had a new story in it, about why they arrested us, and, totally new affidavit. And the funny thing is later I went and got all the case file from the federal building, and, and I had to pay and make copies of everything. That affidavit is not even in the file, and we have copies of it because it was the first affidavit, and somehow we got copies of it, but it was removed from the file. The affidavit that said an agent in the church tipped them off and that we tested this stuff and it was positive for LSD. That wasn't a part of the case anymore after the second hearing we had. There was new affidavits, and every time we went in, because we went to several hearings, there was just new affidavits, new stories. I was just struck with just like, these guys can just write anything they want, say anything they want, new versions of everything, and, and take out old ones that are, and not be held accountable that they just made stuff up, And also, why are they against us having, bringing this stuff to the country, This agent, the main agent on the case, DEA agent Doyle, he was speaking a lot, and when we were being arrested, and one guy turned to him and said, "Yeah, why are we doing this?" They said to Agent Doyle, and Doyle said, "Yep, got orders from Washington." Another time I was riding in a car with Agent Doyle, somehow being brought, I don't know where, transported between one place and another. It was within a couple, it might have been the next day, and or the second time we were there, somehow we were in a car and they were bringing us, I don't know, but the guys are talking in the front seat, and Agent Doyle saying, "No, we got orders from Washington not to drop it." One person said, "Why don't we drop this? What is this? Seems odd." One agent's talking right in front of us, right in front of me, and this seems odd. Why aren't we dropping the case? And Agent Doyle said, "No, orders from Washington. We got to pursue this." And I'm sitting there in the back seat in handcuffs, like, oh my God, what am I caught up in, And I didn't have any doubt about the practice of ayahuasca or that we shouldn't be doing it, but what is going on? Orders from Washington? We have to pursue this? People in the field saying, hey, they're shipping some stuff up to the United States. Get them. That's odd to me, It's odd to me that what motivated in that 1990 Justice Department that was under George Bush Sr., what motivated them? It's been questions I've been asking myself ever since. What motivated them to want to stop, the practice of ayahuasca ceremonies in the United States? I didn't have an answer to that question for years, but after more than a decade and a half, maybe even 2 decades, it just became very clear to me, paying attention, that the reason that they wanted to stop this has to do with conservative or religious fundamentalism. And some people, not all, but some people in government and positions of authority have agendas of, there won't be any religion in this country except for our version of quote-unquote Christianity, So I really believe that the motivation in 1990, Justice Department and whoever it was in Washington ordering them to pursue this, their motivation was Christian religious conservatism. They're going to just persecute us because we're not them. And they're using the authority of this Constitution that my great-uncle, 8th great-uncle Benjamin Franklin wrote, religious freedom, they're using that to persecute us because we're not in your fundamentalist religion. The way I feel now, it's like, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to use that authority or to even have that attitude? It's wrong. And I'm going to defend it till the day I'm not in this world. And then wherever I go after, I'm going to be a defender. Because no, you don't have the right under our Constitution or under any authority to persecute others because you think that your religion is correct. And others, if others of us aren't in your religious belief or your group, you have the right to persecute us and hurt us and destroy us, lock us in prisons, destroy our lives. Worse. You really don't have that right, even though you are doing that. And that's a big message of mine, that why I want to share this story. No one has that right to persecute anybody for any reason, especially for religion, And my attitude about religion is I respect anybody that prays anywhere. If you pray, then you have my support. And I know people that pray for all different religions. The big ones here in the United States are Catholic, and then Protestant denominations and Judaism. Those are the ones that I grew up with knowing, right? So I'm not a member of any of those churches, and I have a lot of issues with those churches and the histories. But people in those churches who pray and are sincere, I support you. Pray, please. We need more prayer, So I won't say much more. I won't go off on any more tangent about religion, but I don't prescribe to any of these religions that I grew up with. And even though I have my own relationship with the story of Jesus and Mary, and with Buddhism, and with other eclectic things, with traditions that maybe didn't come recently from Europe, but were traditional ways of praying that are still somewhat intact in North America, Central America, South America, Africa. Those things inspire me to be, for my spiritual practices, So that affidavit, it changed every time. Okay, so all right, these notes I'm looking at, I just went over the stuff. Yeah. There's something, I'm going to just a little bit more about when I asked myself why, for many years, why would anybody be motivated to do this, to persecute us for practicing ancient traditions, using ayahuasca and, in healing ceremonies where people actually really get healed, right? Why would anybody be motivated to do that? And, that I saw something about 15-ish years ago or so, maybe 20 years ago. I saw something on a television documentary, and maybe it was within the last 15 years, it was a while back. And this television documentary was showing what used to be like either a state or a federal park in Georgia. But this state park all of a sudden had fence put all around it and signs, US property, keep out, no trespassing. And what was inside of this state park were ruins that resemble the same ruins that are, around the Gulf of Mexico and down in Central America, and attributed to the Mayan people, in the way that this was laid out. So what motivated somebody to put a big fence around it and say, keep out? It seems to me that just some kind of an admission that there was people here before European people came, and they had intelligence, they had culture, they had religious practice. That seems to be the motivation, and back to that religious conservative influence in our government. It's not the whole government or everybody that works for the government, but there's some people in the government that are influenced to just try to persecute non-Western religious spiritual healing practices. So that's why. That's why I believe that's the answer to why, you know. And it seems that when certain, depending on what American political parties in power, there's more of that, and sometimes when other parties are in power, the other parties in power, there's less of that. You know, when those people came, those FBI agents came and sat at our table, it was during a different Justice Department, a different time, a different presidential administration. When they came and sat at our table in our church and looked at the statue and looked at us and didn't arrest us and drag the children off into custody. And when they came back a few weeks later and said, okay, we want to respect you. We see you're practicing religion. We don't want to persecute you. We're going to drop all the charges against you guys. We're going to dismiss them all. And we're going to ask you to work to get exemptions. Now, seeing the difference then and in 1990 when a whole different presidential administration was in and how they behaved, you know, orders from Washington, it gives me an inkling that, yes, there are some elements of political authority where people have conservative religious views who feel like they can use the power of the United States to persecute others for religious practice that isn't theirs. After all these decades, that's pretty much a conclusion of to an answer to my question, why? That's it. That's pretty much it. So the funny thing too is later on the administration changed and the Justice Department changed, and Jeffrey Bronfman, after they dismissed charges and said, you know, you've got go pursue exemptions, I guess Jeffrey Bronfman from the UDV church went and asked the government, give me my medicine back that you took, you know. I'm not sure if they did that in Oregon or not too, and they were part of it, but Jeffrey Bronfman went and asked, and they didn't give it medicine back. There was a different Justice Department again. Some of the same people that were in the 1990 Justice Department were back, and somehow this agenda of religious conservatism was back and motivating actions taken by the Justice Department. And so they told Jeffrey Bronfman, we're not giving you your medicine back. And they started the fight up again. And Jeffrey, I guess, has financial resources. He legally fought the federal government, and that led to the case heard in the Supreme Court in 2005, and the Santo Daime people participated in. And like I said earlier, I didn't assert myself on the front lines because I was so burnt out. I just said, I can't be on the front lines, I need to be in the back. I had intended all along to, whenever they went to the Supreme Court, I'm going to be right there. But by the time it came around, I was very burnt out and still recovering from the trauma, and I paid my dues, and other people are on the front lines. So I didn't go to the Supreme Court hearing, and I didn't, I worked on the fringes with the lawyers. I met with lawyers and heard a little what was going on, but I wasn't in all the meetings and all the planning. I didn't assert myself in, okay, I'm going to be right here trying to give input, you know, and some of the people were respectful and welcoming of me to be a part of the conversation. So, you know, at any rate, the Supreme Court case did happen. My support was, I went and did some ceremonies with some elders from the Peyote Church, and they were going to testify in the Supreme Court case. And out of thankfulness, I drove down to Pennsylvania with my sister, who was in the Santo Daime, grandmother Diane, who's from the Cree Nation. We went together, and we went to a meeting with the man whose name was Junior, and he and his father went and testified in favor of the UDV Church and the Santo Daime supporting us in the Supreme Court. They were witnesses in the case for the UDV Church, saying, you know, we support what these guys are doing. And, you know, because I heard that they were going to go be these witnesses, I went down in thankfulness and went to their ceremony. And in the ceremony, I thanked him, and I told him on the side about my role. You know, at that time it was 15, 16 years earlier and what I had gone through. And just thanked them, you know. Junior also and his father, they're no longer in this world, but they helped us. And I got to be in many ceremonies with, before that, and since then a couple, with Junior and with his father, grandfather. They call him grandfather. And, I forget if it was Grandfather Wilson or whatever. Grandfather Vincent was his name. And Grandfather Vincent, that was Junior's father. They were Ute, you know, and they went and testified for the Santo Daime. I also know, and I'm proud that my case was a part of a precedent, and it was cited in that Supreme Court argument. From what I understand, the case from Boston that resolved in 1991, you know, which is my case with Rex Bynum. That case also was cited as a precedent, you know. So I'm proud of that, and that's the place that was given to me. That's part of the place. It's part of my place, you know. So let me see. I wanted to also mention a little bit details about the case that I didn't include when I was speaking in my previous presentation. But you know, these federal agents, when the case started, they rolled in all these with dollies. They rolled in all these boxes, and then they had all these boxes, and I'm thinking, what the heck are all these boxes, right? And you know what? They actually didn't have anything. So when Judge Skinner said, you know, no, I'm not accepting your guilty plea. When he said that to Rex, and he turned to Jeffrey, the prosecutor, and said, you know, what do you have? He started fumbling, and he had 2 articles that didn't even have anything negative about the use of ayahuasca, and he had a photo album. And they didn't have anything else. Later on, they returned some stuff that they confiscated from me. So those boxes, they had nothing in them, you know. They didn't have anything pertinent to our case, you know. There was during one of our ceremonies in Cambridge, we had books where if you came to the ceremony, you signed into, you know, we kept records. It was like we were always trying to be above board. We're going to keep records of our ceremony. Who came? You signed in. I came to the ceremony, right? So during one of the ceremonies, those books disappeared. We're like, what happened to the books? And then a year after the case resolved in 1991, a year later, they finally gave Rex his car back. It took a year. And they gave him a couple, like 1 or 2 boxes of stuff they took from him that was evidence. And those boxes contained the books that were taken from our ceremony. So we had agents in the field in our ceremony who came and took our books, you know. And wanted to just share that. But a couple of the things they gave back to me after, or my lawyer actually had, they said, here's the evidence we have against your client. And they had 2 things that I had in my wallet, a handwritten, the lyrics to a song by Patti Smith, and the last part of the last line of the song makes me come on like some heroin, meaning makes me come on like I'm dancing around barefoot, and it makes me feel like a heroine, right? A female hero. And I'm not the world's best speller, even though I went to school later in life. I still, you know, my spelling's improved, but I wrote in this handwritten version of the song the lyrics because I wanted to, I liked the song and I wanted to learn it, maybe play it on guitar. It was a cool song. And the last line is, makes me come on like some heroin. And I didn't think it was the drug heroin, but I misspelled the word heroin, added an E onto it or something. And so they gave that to my lawyer. This is evidence against him. He's got this thing written down that has the word heroin on it. And my lawyer asked me, what is this? And I said, that's the Patti Smith song. And she read it and she started cracking up. She goes, I cannot wait until we're in court and they bring this thing up as evidence. And the only other evidence they had against me personally, besides the fact that I was there with Rex and I was in the church and I lived with them and I was there picking up, unloading the shipment, right, in Cambridge. The only other evidence they had against me was a fundraising letter from the radio station WBCN. Now, when some people from the community came up from, and they were involved in the save the Amazon, save the rainforest, and they represented the Mapia Inauini Extractive Reserve, and it was like, this is the community where Santo Daime was, and the Brazilian government, during the Save the Rainforest, because of politics, they wouldn't give anybody land, all these poor groups of rubber tappers and forest people. The only people they would give land to is, they created this extractive reserve and they gave it to the Santo Daime Church because the Santo Daime Church was non-political at the time. It was like it was the safest thing for the political government, for the Brazilian government to do. We're going to pick this. We'll give land to show that we're doing something to save the rainforest. So we'll give it to these religious people who practice the Ayahuasca religion. Give it to them because they're not making a big political stink, And there was some atrocious things politically going on. There still are in the Amazon. The very rich people, there's a lot of atrocious things they do. Murder and other torture of forest people who speak up against them or who defy them in any way, shape, or form. It was going on in 1990, and I'm shocked to know that it's still going on today. There's still articles all the time about atrocious things that rich Brazilian robber barons are doing to the common forest people, including murder. And the community, the family of Padrinho Sebastião, his wife actually is related to Chico Mendes, and Chico Mendes was murdered in 1989 by terrible robber barons because he was like forming like an organized resistance against these sick rich people who just did whatever they want. So they tortured and murdered him, and they tortured people in his family, for years after too. These are relatives of some of the Santo Daime people. The government didn't want to give Chico Mendes and his people land because it was too politically charged. So they gave it to the Mapia Inauini Extractive Reserve, and that's all that they said we're going to do for preserving land. And they made laws and things, depending on what party's in power, the laws are either enforced or they're not, from then till now. So that last segment was pretty much just, in the trial, in the case, when these guys wheeled in dollies of boxes, and there wasn't anything that had anything to do with our case in these boxes. And then they were slapping and laughing and slapping their knees. And then in the end, I just remember seeing them, they just quickly rolled the boxes out of the cord. And I was like, what are these people? What is this, So anyway, I wanted to add those few more details about the case. Yes. Oh yeah, here's another piece. So after Judge Skinner decided to waive the jury and find us both not guilty, he called the jury in. We had a whole full jury that was selected in the whole process, and they were waiting out in a room, right? And then this whole scenario played out that I described earlier. It played out, and then it was Judge Skinner decided I'm going to waive the jury and find both these guys not guilty on the grounds of they were practicing a religion. They had no criminal intent, and they were practicing a religion. That's what he said. So the jury comes in, and they're all sitting there in the jury pool, and Judge Skinner was just gave him a really nice discourse about how the law works and how, the law, everything worked well today, and how, parties work things out and come to an agreement and understanding about what's going on, and therefore, you're all dismissed because we don't need you. We've worked everything out, and I was kind of touched by his lecture that Judge Skinner gave to the jury, you know. So, okay. So I did laws, then some details about the case. So I want to go down, I want to talk about traditional leadership roles, you know. So what I would understand, like in Santo Daime, when Santo Daime formed in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, right? The tradition that they got from indigenous people, you know, for their ceremonies was that, you know, in order to have somebody facilitating ceremonies, it had to be a man and a woman, a married couple. And when I met peyote church people, you know, I was told that in their tradition, traditionally, those who ran ceremonies, it was, you know, usually a married couple, you know, a man and a woman. They run it together, or a family, you know. You know, in the Santo Daime, there was a rule. You had to, and Rex told me this. I think Pedrinho Sebastião shared this with him at that time, but. And so Rex was sharing this with me in 1989. You know, the Santo Daime people, you had to be a married couple. You had to have own land. And then you had to have a place to build a church. And you had to have a community of people that wanted you to be the leaders, you know. They had to support you as running Ayahuasca ceremonies, Santo Daime ceremonies. This was like, from what I understand, were the original rules of a Santo Daime community, of a church, you know. And same thing, something along those lines were kind of the framework in traditional medicine ceremonies in North America and Central America and South America, you know, from what I've understood and talked to different elders over the years. But the reason is, you know, now in our time, the time that we live in, we don't have, you know, a lot of married couples get divorced, right? So they had to start changing the rules, or not so much changing them, but just, okay, we have these rules and this is how it's supposed to be, but if we don't let this couple who got divorced, if we don't let them keep running ceremonies, and then after that, other people who were never married in the first place, men and women running ceremonies, if we don't let them do that, we won't have any ceremonies, because that's a condition of the world. We don't have, like, everywhere you go, healthy families, healthy couples that have land and have a place to do a church, that have a community of people around them that want them. So in our time, in order to have ceremonies, they don't follow these old framework, this old, you know, kind of rules of what it takes to be somebody who leads ceremonies, you know. So all kinds of people are leading ceremonies, you know. And over these years, since the 80s till now, I've met many people. They just appoint themselves, you know. They've just appointed themselves. Even in Santo Daime, people came to a few Santo Daime. Okay, I'm a Padrino, you know. And there was one leader, one Santo Daime leader, who, you know, on one hand might have went, well, I'm spreading this all over the place. And where he would come to the United States and somebody would come to one or two ceremonies and I want to have, you know, I want to lead ceremonies. And he'd go, okay, here, you can have some of my medicine. I'll ship it to you and you lead them. You know, come to pass, the real motivation for this one particular leader was anytime he wanted to just come up and do fundraising, okay, I'm coming up and I'm going to have ceremonies and, you know, everybody's going to pay hundreds of dollars. And, you know, we're doing it next week or next month. No questions asked. Whenever I want to come, and then we're doing it. And then all you guys come, you know, he would just do that with these groups, you know. Here, anybody, you did 3 ceremonies, here's some medicine. Go ahead, open up a point. And then, so when I tell you, you're going to organize a thing and invite all these people and I'm going to make money, you know. So it's sad to say that, but that is the fact of what motivates some people. You know, they might have good intentions or just say, oh, I'm doing all this good, but really a lot of what they're doing, like giving somebody who did 3 ceremonies medicine and telling them to open a point, the only motivation for that is to make money, you know. I don't support that. And, I don't support people taking medicine 3 times and then leading ceremonies. And I witnessed over these last 3.5 decades, I witnessed a lot of harm coming about from people doing that, from people just doing a few ceremonies and then, oh, I'm leading things now. And then, some people who really weren't well leading ceremonies, some to dime ceremonies and other ceremonies, and just appointing themselves to some kind of great shamanistic leaders and harming others and harming what we're doing. We don't need that kind of harm. We don't need that kind of bad attention, on these beautiful, beautiful practices, these beautiful, beautiful, potentially beautiful healing spiritual ceremonies with plant medicines. We don't need that. So that really hurts me to witness that. It hurts me that people come and just do a few ceremonies and then all of a sudden I'm a leader. And there's other traditions where people do that. I met a guy who says he's a doctor. He's from Mexico and travels around the United States and says, he does some kind of an ancient frog, DMT frog ceremony. I didn't go, I just met him, and I want to be respectful, but, I met him and said, oh, that's really good what you do, but, the person wasn't very friendly and didn't seem to respect anybody else, or, I shared with him, I've been in for 30 years involved with medicine ways, and, have a lot of respect for him, and it's like just blank, strange stare. Come to find out later that I've learned that there is no Mexican traditions, and this guy just makes them up, and a lot of controversy. So there's a lot of things like that where people just take these beautiful medicines and then go around and make up who they are and what traditions they come from, and and they have all this experience, and and we do need a body, a watch, one or more watchdogs over this, and There's also this whole movement. I looked online the other day, and there's 20 or 30 medicine ceremony integration coaches. All right, so I'm sure some of these mean well, but all of a sudden, people are just medicine certificate. I don't know, I don't know. I guess there's so many medicine ceremonies everywhere now. You need integration coaches, so these people become a certified medicine ceremony integration coach, right? I'm not sure. I'm sure they all mean well, or some of them mean well. Some might just be making a business, and I don't know. I heard a story of one guy, and this might be good. One guy who just somehow did ayahuasca in Peru, right? And then just went to Florida, so moved and transformed that he just started his own thing, right? Now, I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm not sure if, I don't even remember the name of the guy, but, they say, we're just trying to help people. I don't know if it's good or bad. I've heard bad things about people doing that, just starting their own thing, and I've heard good things, so I don't know, don't have all the answers. But I know that it's happening. I've met over these 30 years many peyote people who run peyote ceremonies, and some of them are violent and predators, but yet they did ceremonies and people learned good things and people got help, people, so my perspective was, these things exist, right? And we're people, so these people, their families and their, practice these ways, and the ways themselves are good. The fire is the fire. The water is the water, the medicine's the medicine. When this person they're conducting ceremonies and they have a lot of psychological and emotional and violent tendencies and predator tendencies, but yet the medicines and the fire and the ceremonies are pure and good and people got help, and yet they also got exposed to violence and sexual predation and monetary predation. So there's just, that does not give others an excuse to persecute us or tell us these religions are invalid, because you're all doing it in your churches. Same exact thing and worse, And some of you guys who are famous, American evangelicals who names that everybody knows, you're all caught in terrible sexual and monetary predation things. And you're infiltrating government trying to persecute other people who aren't in your group. So, I don't feel afraid to talk about, there's things going on, right? That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing these ceremonies or working with plant medicines. We should be. Who wants to and who's called? And we should learn how to make safe, groups and safe practices. So that's what, the traditional leadership roles, traditional communities, right? They aren't like the way our community is now. We have a lot of problems with community and common unity. We have a lot of problems. We don't have a healthy community in the United States of America. We don't. And communities traditionally before modern times, communities started out with families. The basis of all community starts in the family. And then the extended, the closest relatives, and then your relatives, your bigger family, and then extended families, clans, Then from clans to larger communities. Common unity, right? That to me is what, quote unquote, church is. Church is, traditions, spiritual practices that were passed down through families, understandings, and then, families, relatives, extended family, clans, larger communities. That's what spiritual practice, stuff that translates into religion, it's rooted in this. And this is what a healthy manifestation is. Family, relatives, extended family, larger communities of related clans and extended families, cultures, right? That have common unity. We can talk about unity and common unity. You can't just force it, I noticed in the Santo Daime in the early days, there was all this union. People would be going on and singing and saying union, but there wasn't real union. Real union takes a lot to build, and it isn't do it my way or union is my way and not your way or no way. That's not unity, So I'm talking about all this because these use of plant medicines and the traditions that inspire them, and there's modern manifestations of them. They are all rooted in this kind of traditional leadership roles, married couples and, elders and people that respect those elders and want them to lead a ceremony of any kind, with or without medicine. Families, relatives, extended family, clans, larger cultures, different clans, common unity. So this is the religious freedom that I choose. I choose religious freedom, and it doesn't have to fit into the framework of whatever came out of Europe and the Middle East. It doesn't, And how those manifested today are commercial ventures and control ventures, I mean, the Roman Catholic Church was, Constantine was the leader at the time of the Romans and said, we're going to form the Roman Catholic Church. And they took bodies of scriptures and took some pieces that fit into what they needed to use to have a state religion and other things that were written and recognized at the time. This doesn't fit into a state religion, so let's put it out, So, the history of the Roman Catholic Church to me is atrocious. And yet I know a lot of really good people that pray and they consider themselves Catholic, So I'm not an enemy of people who pray, but the history itself is the enemy of the people. What's been done in the name of Catholicism, cultural genocide, sexual abuse, just false authority, in my view. True authority comes from creation. Authority comes only, I have a song, authority comes only from God, and God doesn't practice, God doesn't behave. Creation doesn't behave like this. The love of God is pure divine giving. The love of God is pure giving, pure charity, pure love, pure support. You know, that's the authority that I believe in. The authority of goodness, the authority of creation, the authority of what's right. You know. This is the authority that I believe in. This is my religion. Love, music, care, beauty way, warm-hearted way, good-hearted way, sunshine road, compassion, responsibility, maturity, calmness, support, supportive, dignity, respect for ourselves and others. You know, these are just some words that relate to what my right to choose the religious practice that I want, that my great uncle Benjamin Franklin, my 8th grade uncle, brought that concept and put it in the Constitution. And you know, nobody has a right to use the authority of that Constitution to persecute me or anybody for what we choose to practice religiously. And I choose plant medicines, you know, as one spiritual practice. You know, and I choose to be a lay Buddhist, according to my understanding. You know, I choose that, and I choose to support the people I know who practice the peyote religions. I choose to support that, and I choose to participate in those sometimes. You know, I'm a little older now, and I'm not involved with a lot of ceremonies these days, but I support them, and I will be involved again when I have opportunities to go and sit. And I'll respectfully sit, and I'll respectfully conduct myself the way that is expected in any given ceremony that I go to, whatever it is. I'll try my best to be an example of being a good person, all these things. And we do have freedom, you know, and so I'll conclude this part of the presentation. The notes I wrote and the things I wanted to say, I think I said them for now, and there's more. So I'm going to sing a couple of songs. One song is a song that came to me when I was locked up in Danbury Federal Prison, Danbury FCI, Federal Corrections Institute. The song came to me in the courtyard. And then another song is the first medicine song that came to me. So I'm going to sing those two songs. So there's a couple more, there's some additional points that I meant to share about the case. Go back to these notes for reference. Details about the case. In our case, it was actually January 1991 when we went to trial in Boston. Well, we had Dr. Andrew Weil, who was an expert witness, and he was a friend of Jim Lawson's. I believe they went to school together at Harvard, and they had worked on other cases too, some famous cases that had to do with ethnobotany and the use of plant medicines. But anyway, Dr. Andrew Weil he flew into town, and he was there, and he was going to be called as a witness that day or the next day if the trial went to trial. But we cleared it all up, as I described earlier, and so we didn't have to go to trial and present the case and do any more than what happened. So we wanted to meet Dr. Weil, and so Attorney Lawson put us in touch with him, and we arranged to just go have breakfast the next morning and meet him, and just say thank you, and just meet him and talk about our case and thank you for your support and all that. So we went to a hotel in Cambridge where he was staying, and we had breakfast with him, and we talked about things, and he was involved with other ethnobotany type of expert witness things. And, just talked about things. We met him, and so he invited us to come over to Harvard to meet Richard Schultes, and I think it was later that day or the next day. So either later that day or the next day, we were at Harvard in Harvard Yard, and we met. There was Andy Weil, and then we were with him, and then Rick Doblin showed up, and Rick Doblin is the founder of MAPS. And I guess he went to school, or he met Andy Weil through going to school at Harvard and then founding MAPS, the multidisciplinary association, for psychedelic studies. And so we met Rick Doblin, and there was Andy Weil, and then we had a nice conversation. We connected with Rick, and we told him about our case, and we made plans that we're going to stay in touch, and as time goes on, work together a little more. And I was very happy to meet Rick then. A few years later, I did meet Rick more and spend more time. He had me at his house and several times, and I was really inspired by him. I just want to say that. Really inspired by him, what he was doing, what inspired him in the first place, the way he described being young and taking LSD, and then seeing about the future, like how can I support this in the future to bring this to humanity in a good way? And he actually spent his whole life doing that with MAPS, just psychedelic studies. How can this benefit humanity? And I had that same sense when I was, 12 years old, just before I turned 13. When I grow up, I want to be involved with, the peyote church, which uses a medicine like this, and with anything that can bring this to humanity and for benefit. And the place that was given to me was to have this role and to go through this persecution. So I did get to make my contribution, and Rick Doblin very inspired me, very huge inspiration to me to be in a position in life where he could do exactly what he did, go to school, and then he eventually went to Harvard, and they founded MAPS, and they're doing great work, and now they've helped to get MDMA, like part of mainstream where it can be. They're doing studies so that it'll be able to be used therapeutically. They're training people to be, MDMA, therapists. And then we also have, I think MAPS was definitely involved, and we have a group of people doing research, medical research with treating people with psilocybin, and I don't 100% agree with all of their, conclusions, like the only way to have an experience is to have a heroic dose. That's all great, and I agree with it, but it isn't the only way from my personal experience. It's not the only way, but I'm glad what they're doing, and I fully support that whatever they've got permission from the government, and it looks like at some point they're going to be it's going to be an accepted medical use, psilocybin and MDMA. MDMA was used for therapy, in the 80s, in the early 80s, maybe the late 70s, successfully in marriage counseling and trauma. So these are definitely the right uses of these sacred medicines. And MDMA, it's organic form. It comes from sassafras, some compounds of sassafras and some compounds of nutmeg. These are organic medicines, and human beings figured out how to combine them and, make this medicine, MDMA. MDA as well, I guess, is another form of it. So I'm no expert in all these things, but I just, I met Rick Doblin then the day after my trial, and I got to become friends with him later on and to visit him in his home several times, and I've always been extremely inspired by the work he's done. And I'm coming out of my shell now, presenting my part through this presentation and whatever comes out of this, whatever we do, talks, lectures, films, books, articles, whatever comes next. Thank you, Rick, for all the work you've done and all the people that like that. So we met, we were with Andy Weil and Rick Doblin that day, and then Richard Schultes came by, and so it's me and Rex, Richard Schultes, Andy Weil, Rick Doblin standing there, and Richard Schultes, Andy introduced us, and these guys got arrested, and then they just won their case and everything, and he was very interested, and he had been to the Amazon, and he got sick apparently in the Amazon, and he was doing some work, kind of secretly working for the government during World War II to look for sources of rubber, and I guess he was wandering through the jungle and completely lost contact. They didn't have cell phones, and he got really, really sick, and the indigenous people healed him. They gave him ayahuasca and helped him to heal from his sickness that he had, Richard Schultes, and he became, from that experience, he became an ethnobotanist. I believe he actually formed the field of ethnobotany at Harvard. He had a museum there, Peabody Museum, up on the top floor. In the Peabody Museum, there was a whole section of ethnobotany, and so we visited him there later. I'll come back to that in a second. But in that circle of all of us standing around, Richard Schultes was very interested in our story, and he invited us to stay in touch with him. And he was interested in Rex and mine's academic credentials, and Rex, I think, had a master's degree from Oxford in linguists and whatever else he studied. But I had just started going to school. By that time in January 1990, I had just turned 1991. January 1991, I had just turned 29. The last September before that, and I was just starting to go back to school. So I felt a little awkward because I was with these guys. They were all from Harvard, and Rex went to Oxford, and Richard Schultes was asking us, oh, where'd you go to school? And I said, well, I'm just starting. And he actually looked at me and goes, oh, well, there's the extension school over here. And, he's really sincere, very warm the way he said that. And when I visited him later in his lab, I went with Rex a couple of times. We went to visit him before we went to the Amazon. A couple of years later, we took a trip, Rex, Jamie, Alea, and myself, we took a trip to the Amazon, and we took some film. And when we came back, we went over to visit with Richard Schultes and with Dr. Wilson too. So we brought this film, and Schultes invited his friend, E.O. Wilson, to come over, and they sat with me and Rex, and we just showed them film of the Amazon and pictures, of us on canoes and going into the jungle and the ceremonies and just life in the Amazon. And Rex had one picture that he took when we were out collecting. We went out with some young guys collecting the vine and the leaf in the jungle. Like, they have a whole crew of people. They go out into the jungle and harvest from the wild the jagubi vine and the leaf that's used. And Rex took a picture of the vine, and then Richard Schultes liked it and said he wanted to use it in his book. So Rex gave it to him, and it was in his book. Okay, so I'm going to sing a couple of songs. The songs are part of the story. This song actually came to me when I was sitting in the courtyard of Danbury Prison, and I like the song. I want to share it. It's inspiring to me that music can make you feel better, and maybe it can tell the story too to other people. See how I do with my hay fever. Well, it's the first day that I woke up in this prison. A little bird flies over the prison yard and walls. But I've been caged down in this place by the DEA. Gonna be a long and a lonely night till tomorrow. They don't like the way I use my And this is my first medicine ceremony song right here. It's called She Is Our Mother. This came to me maybe right after the case resolved, I think it came to me. Aho, thank you for listening. You made it this far, and I look forward to sharing more about this story and about support and defending of religious freedom and the use of plant medicines for healing, for spiritual practice, and the protection of these things and of watchdog over anybody who would misuse anything like this, hurt others. Thank you. Aho.